Hello and welcome to the first episode of It's Just Racing with Jim and Jim. I'm Jim,
And I'm Jim.
and we're here to talk about racing. Going to start off with a little bit of a recap of what's gone on in the last week. Not a lot because it is January and it's too cold to race. But two things did occur. We had the Chili Bowl, the largest midget race, I'd like to say, in the world. Kyle Larson, once again, won his third Golden Driller at the Chili Bowl. It was rather uneventful. He led from the drop of the green to the checkers to pick up the win.
Now, I thought he was going to wreck when he jumped over that lap car. I'm not sure how he kept it going.
Yeah, that and when he was riding the wall. But he, in classic Kyle Larson form, still managed to hold on and run away with the victory. Also, we had Supercross this week, second round of Supercross. This week they were in San Diego. In the 250 class, Juju Beaumer took the win and took over the points lead. Then in the 450 class, Cooper Webb jumped out to the early lead and was passed about halfway through by Eli Tomac, who held off a charge from Jet Lawrence to take the win and also take over the points lead in the 450 class. Now, Tomac just set the record and became the first rider in Supercross history to win a race, 11 straight seasons.
There's a lot to be said about his longevity. It's hard to be at the top of your game for so long, especially in a sport as physical as Supercross is.
Yeah, it sure looks abusive with guys getting hurt every week, it seems like, to be able to keep operating at that level every year. That's impressive. So what we'll do now is do a preview of the 24 Hours of Daytona, big endurance race to start the season. I'm not a big endurance race guy. That's his forte. But for the casual fans like myself, here's some names to know in case you happen to catch yourself in a room you can seem knowledgeable or at least have someone to root for. In the top class, the GTP class, which is also called
The hypercars.
We've got former Formula One driver Kevin Magnussen, Formula One, and former IndyCar driver Romain Grosjean. Current IndyCar drivers Scott Dixon, Tom Blomqvist, Felix Rosenqvist, and current defending IndyCar champion Alex Palou. In the next class, the LMP2 class, we've got current IndyCar driver Colton Herta, and also Callum Ilott, another IndyCar driver. And Sebastian Bourdais, four-time IndyCar champion, is in the LMP2 class this year. Stepping over to the GTD Pro class, got a couple former IndyCar drivers, James Hinchcliffe and Townsend Bell. A couple current IndyCar drivers, Kyle Kirkwood and Scott McLaughlin. Connor Zilic, who's making the jump to full-time Xfinity driver this year. Shane Van Gisbergen, who's moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series. And Austin Cindric, who's also a NASCAR Cup driver. And then in the GTD Amateur class, which we'll discuss that class later, we've got former IndyCar driver Tatiana Calderon and former Xfinity driver Parker Kligerman. We also have a lad named Arthur Leclerc, who you may not know who that is, but you do know his big brother, Charles, Ferrari driver for Formula One. And if you're like me and you just like to root for the old guys because, well, you're not 20 anymore, we've got Ben Keating, who will be piloting two cars in this year's race for two different teams. He'll be driving the number 52 LMP2 car, and he'll also be driving the Trackhouse Racing Corvette. Speaking of Trackhouse Racing, Jimmy here is going to do a deeper dive into that team.
I'm very excited about Trackhouse Racing this year. It's the first year they've fielded a car in IMSA. They've got a customer Corvette in the GT Pro class, and their lineup, it's very exciting. They've got Ben Keating, who's always been good. He consistently defies Father Time at 53 years old. I mean, it's just amazing to see how he keeps competing in these endurance races at such a high level. And he's teaming up this year with Connor Zilic, along with Scott McLaughlin and Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, Scott McLaughlin, he's coming off probably the best IndyCar season of his career so far. He's getting close to the top of his game driving for Penske, and now he's also had some success in the LMP2 class in IMSA. Shane Van Gisbergen is no stranger to endurance racing. He's been doing that over in Australia for years. But I'm really excited about Connor Zilic. Now, I've been following his career for a few years, ever since he started in the Miata series. And this kid, he's 18 now, and he's getting ready for his first NASCAR Xfinity series. And he's just one of those rare talents that you really don't see that often. And he can just get in any type of car, and he just wins, and it's fun to watch. And so I'd look to Trackhouse Racing to be a favorite to win in the GT Pro category. Now, this class, I think it might be a good competitive battle at the top of the field. Last year's winner, Risi Competizione, that Ferrari, will not be competing this year. So we will have a new winner in the class. And along with Trackhouse, there's a couple other cars I'd like to highlight that I think could be up towards the top. Pfaff Motorsports, they're back. They've got a new car. You may remember them as the plaid Porsche from a couple years ago. They won the championship in 2022. Last year, they switched over to a McLaren, and they did not find much success. They had reliability problems. The car wasn't plaid anymore. There were just all sorts of things happening.
I think that was the main contributing factor, was they ditched the plaid livery, and with that, they lost all of their success.
You know, there is something to be said for that. Just the fan presence behind that plaid. They brought it back this year. They're driving a Lamborghini now, and it is plaid, and it looks pretty cool. And I'm hoping that they have a bounce back year. They do have a couple of new drivers with the new Lamborghini car. They have picked up Andrea Caldarelli and Jordan Pepper, who are former Squadra Corsa drivers for Lamborghini. And so I'm hoping that they can bring the experience with the car to the team, and I hope that's what they need to get up to speed and back to their winning ways. Also in the GT Pro class, you can't forget the defending champion, AO Racing, the Porsche, as Rexy. That's the dinosaur liveried car.
Oh, the green Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yes.
I know that car.
That one's always a fan favorite. And they're fast too. They finished second at this race last year. And they're looking to build upon their championship with a strong start to this year. Now, they did have a couple of electrical issues during Petit Le Mans, the last race of the previous season. So hopefully they've figured those out, whatever was happening with that, that they can stop that from happening this year and get off to a good start. Moving over to the GT Amateur class, there are 22 cars this year.
I just don't understand why they're called amateurs. These are all professional race car drivers. They call it the amateur class. It's ridiculous. Well,
there's a few cars to highlight in the GT Amateur class. It's always good racing. They are the same spec, the cars are, as the GT Pros. The only difference is the driver ratings. The defending champions in this class, the Windward Mercedes, they've got the same driver lineup, same car. They're looking to build on that success.
Wait a second. So in the amateur class, they won the championship last year, and they're coming back again this year, and they're still amateurs?
That's correct.
Okay.
So look for that team to be towards the front. But they will have some challengers. There's some other good teams. A notable one is always AF Corsa, the Ferrari team. They have 2 cars this year. They have split their lineups. There are some driver changes. This year, James Collado, former AF Corsa driver, he will now be driving for Triarsi Competizione in the same class. Also a Ferrari, but a different team. The same with Daniel Serra. He will now be driving for the Conquest Racing Ferrari. But AF Corsa, they might pull some strategy with the two cars, try to get one ahead, play a little defense maybe, try to reel in those other front runners. But it's always good to have a multi-car effort, just to give you that little bit of an edge that you might need.
Always good to have friends out there on the racetrack, especially in a 24-hour race.
Another team that I think could have a bit of a spurt this year is the Inception team. Now, this team I always liked because I like McLarens, and they were the only McLaren in this class for a couple years. Now, they have switched manufacturers. They are a Ferrari now. There are no more McLarens in the IMSA series.
No McLarens?
No, they've had some problems. The cars, they're lacking just a little something. They haven't had a lot of success. There's been reliability issues. I'd like to see McLaren back, but I think they need an upgrade to their cars before that could happen.
Okay.
But so I'd look for the Inception Ferrari to try to have a statement to say, we're still the same team. They've always had speed. They just haven't had it over the long term, over the full season. So hopefully they can compete for a championship in this new car. There are a couple other teams moving over to the Porsche side of the GT amateur class. The Wright Motorsports Porsche. It's always a very nice livery, very competitive car. That's the dark green and yellow kind of classic.
Ooh, that's a classy looking car.
It's a very nice looking car. They won a race last year. They came close to winning this race a couple of years ago. They had a really good last lap battle. They did not come out of that one victorious, but they're hoping they can change their fortunes this year. Another Porsche to look for, you can't miss it. It'll be bright pink. The Iron Dames. Now, they've become a big team lately over in the World Endurance Championship, and this is one of their first forays into the IMSA world. And that team, it's an all-woman team, and they're actually pretty competitive, and they're exciting to watch.
They are a legit team. It's not, some marketing company grabbed 4 women and said, "Hey, y'all are cute, we're going to throw you in a race car." These women can outdrive just about anybody. It's a legit race team. So I'm always pulling for the Iron Dames because they're there on merit.
That's always good to see. And so hopefully they have a good performance in this race. And finally, in the GT class, in the GT amateur class, you've got Forte Racing, which is one of my favorite teams. Last year they had a really nice purple and green liveried Lamborghini. They have changed it now. It's now bright blue. So it's still pretty cool. It'll take a little bit of adjusting to be able to pick it out on track.
Bright blue, like our wall back there?
Or even brighter.
Oh.
But they have also had some driver changes this year. They no longer have Laura Spinelli driving for them.
No Spinelli?
No.
Isn't he like the best Lamborghini driver to have ever lived?
I mean, only if you look at the stats. I mean, he's won countless championships. He's won about 30% of the Super Trofeo races he's been in. He's got to be one of the best Lamborghini drivers ever.
But he's not driving.
No. He helped this team get to their only IMSA victory 2 years ago at Petit Le Mans. He's super fast. I hope we see him back soon. He did just sign a contract with the factory team, with the Squadra Corsa. So hopefully we see something in development with that team soon. But in the meantime, Forte Racing has picked up a couple good additions that should bring experience and speed back to that team. They have Mario Fahrenbacher, who you may know as Super Mario.
And he's driving in the amateur class?
He is classified as an amateur.
Okay.
And he'll be alongside Frank Pereira, who last year was a factory Lamborghini driver for Squadra Corsa. He's going to bring that Lamborghini experience that Spinelli previously brought to the team. I'd like to see that team up towards the front again. It's always good to see them succeed. Moving on to the LMP2 class. There are 12 cars in this class this year. It's always a difficult one to predict what's going to happen because it's as close as you can get to a spec class in this type of racing. There's 2 different chassis manufacturers, but it really comes down to driver skill. And there's a few teams that I could see doing well this year. You can't discount last year's winner, the number 18 Era Motorsports car. They're always pretty good. Connor Zilic is not driving for them this year, but they do still have their two full-time drivers who raced the full season last year. Another team that I think could do well is the number 8 Tower Motorsports car. And I think that they might be a favorite to win just because they have Sebastian Bourdais now. And Seabass, I think he should still be in the top class because he's very fast. He won a lot of races for Ganassi in GTP and in DPI before that. He took a step back this year. I hope he's still at the top of his game. I think he's going to give this team that edge that they need in this class. And I think he's going to be able to put in some very fast stints. Another team that I'm looking for optimistically in the LMP2 class is the number 74 Riley entry. And that's because they've got a former Formula One driver in Felipe Massa, who is returning after a long hiatus. This is one of the first races he's done since a career-ending Formula One crash close to 15 years ago. I think the favorite to win the LMP2 class is going to be the 52, the PR1 Mathiasen Racing entry. It's usually a purple and orange, very distinctive livery. That's the one piloted by Ben Keating along with other drivers. And they just seem to always find themselves in a position to take the win. So I'd look to that team to perform well. And of course, we can't forget about the Premier class, the GTPs. They've got...
Aren't those the ones that you call hypercars too?
I do.
Okay.
I find it's easier than the abbreviations, but it depends. It's personal preference.
Okay.
There's 12 cars. That's not as many as we might have hoped for. Notably, Aston Martin, their Valkyrie hypercar, it is not ready. They said that we're going to have to wait until Sebring to see it on the track. I'm a little disappointed about that. I was excited to see a V12 back on the track. I really like the V12s. So hopefully we see them soon, but we will not next weekend.
Oh, best to wait and put your best product out there right at the start. So, hats off to them.
I mean, it is difficult with all the development that these manufacturers put into these cars to catch up after being a couple years behind, but I think they might be able to do it. Also notably, the Chip Ganassi cars are no longer in GTP. The team has taken a step back from racing, and so those are two Cadillacs that will not be seen this weekend at Daytona. Now, the cars that will be there are 5 manufacturers in GTP. To start out, you've got Porsche, who is the defending champions with the number 7. They also won this race last year. I think that the number 6 car, the sister car to that one, also a factory entry, it might be the favorite. They've got a really strong driver lineup this year in Matthew Jaminet, Matt Campbell, and Kevin Estra, who have all seen a lot of success in endurance racing. And so I would look to that car to be towards the pointy end of the field. The Porsches last year, they did very well at night with the cooler temperatures. They struggled a little bit once it got to the daytime, but the advantage they gained at night was it was big enough to get them the win. Their closest competitor is probably going to be Cadillac. Their closest competitor last year was Cadillac. And the Cadillacs, you don't have the Ganassi cars anymore. So that's a big loss to the manufacturer because Ganassi won them a lot of races. They were very competitive. They do, however, have both Wayne Taylor cars this year. Well, Wayne Taylor has switched both of his cars from Acura to Cadillac. That might have been due to some reliability issues last year. There were, in this race, a total of 6 electrical DNFs, and both Wayne Taylor cars were included in that number. So they're hoping that Cadillac can give them that reliability to be able to fight for championships again. And the Cadillacs, they did very well during the daytime when the temperatures were warmer. And with maybe 1 or 2 more laps, they probably could have challenged for the win of the race.
Wait, now last year, was that the year that they threw the checkered flag too early?
They did. They threw the checkered flag a lap earlier than they should have. And so we only had about 23 hours and 58 minutes of racing.
And that 2 minutes, I bet those Cadillacs would have won.
You know, there was a Cadillac about 2 seconds behind the leader. I was excited for a battle for the lead on the last lap. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that. IMSA did admit to that mistake. They said that it was being addressed. Hopefully we won't see that again, and we can see some good racing.
Yeah, I want all 24 hours. Not that I'm going to watch much of it at all.
A few other teams that might be in the mix. BMW, I think, is often overlooked just because they had a very slow start to last year. They were off the pace. They were kind of inconsistent. They ended stronger, though. They had a 1-2 in Indianapolis, and they did well towards the end of the year. I think with a driver like Kevin Magnussen joining the team, it might give them that veteran experience if they can figure out how to make the car perform week in and week out. Now, a team that I think really needs to take a step up and really needs a statement win is Acura. They lost both the Wayne Taylor cars. Meyer-Shank is back, so they still do have two Acuras out there. But with the reliability issues they've had recently, I think they really need to show that they're still at the top and they can still win. And finally, the last car, just one entry, is the Lamborghini Squadra factory entry. Now, as much as I like Lamborghini, if it's a dry race without any cautions, I don't see this car being very competitive. Last year, they finished most of the races a few laps off the pace. But if it rains, I think they might be able to get up there. It rained in Indianapolis last year for about half the race, and they did take the lead, and they were able to hold on to that lead while it was raining. And I think part of that might be due to their lineup. They've got a couple of former Formula One drivers in Romain Grosjean and Daniel Kvyat, and so they're very good at adapting to those changing conditions. So if you see any adverse weather conditions on the radar, look for the Lamborghini to capitalize on those. There are a few notable driver changes, drivers who have changed teams in the past year, just to look out for. The Whelen Engineering Cadillac, the number 31 in the GTP class, they no longer have Pippo Durrani driving for them. He's driving a customer Corvette in the GT Amateur class.
So Pippo is now an amateur.
Yes, the championship winner in DPI and many-time race winner in GTP.
Is now an amateur.
Correct.
I will never understand that.
But the Whelen entry, they have picked up a couple good drivers. I've never seen them drive yet, but there are a couple of former Formula 2 drivers in Felipe Drugovich and Frederick Vesti, and they're looking to prove themselves in endurance racing now. So that could be exciting to see how they do. Now, Renger van de Zande, he has moved to Meyer-Shank Racing with the closing of the Ganassi teams, and he's a very good driver, so I'd look to him to lead that team. Dane Cameron, formerly of Meyer-Shank, is now driving in the LMP2 series for AO Racing. It is the teammate of Rexy, just in a different class. This one's more of a purple dinosaur. It's a little more, it's harder to see.
So there's two dinosaur cars?
There are.
All right.
You like to see a lot of dinosaurs.
You like to see the dinosaurs. Like me.
And finally, the keys to the race. I mean, there are so many things that can go wrong in this race. There's only so many things you can control as a team. But a few things you need to get right. First, the pit strategy. Now, these GTPs, they're given 21 sets of tires, and that's for qualifying and the race. And they usually need to make 30 or 31 pit stops. So what that means is they're going to need to double stint these tires quite a few times. And I think that the strategy of when you do that could really help your lap times, could help you get into the lead. If you get it wrong, you could struggle with tire warm-up, as the IMSA series does not allow tire blankets or any sort of tire warming.
Also, like in Formula One, when they have the tires all wrapped up and heated, they don't do that in IMSA?
No, these tires are cold, just right off the rack. And so what that means is, especially at night, it gets cold. And you're going to be sliding around because they're slick tires, and on a cold track, it's like driving on ice. And so that's going to be a big key is you have to find that sweet spot where you're pushing, but you're not going too hard on those new tires. Because if you push too hard, you'll find yourself in the grass, in a wall. Your race might be over. But if you don't push enough, you're gonna lose 3 or 4 seconds on your outlap, and that's a big difference to make up. Now, another key I have is just keeping it clean at night. I have never stayed up for the entire 24 hours, but usually I go to bed, I wake up, I look at who's winning, and the team that was winning in the afternoon, they're 20 laps behind, they've crashed, something has happened. And I think you really need to just limit those mistakes at night, and you need to be able to put yourself in the position where you're on the lead lap in the morning and able to race to the finish. And that's the analysis that I've got for this race.
All right, thanks, Jim. Thank you for tuning in, and we will be back next week with a recap of the 24 hours, along with Supercross is at Anaheim for their second race of the year, and whatever else I find interesting.